So I'm Toby, and thank you. As I begin this afternoon, I want to give a content warning. I will be speaking about addiction and its consequences. This is my family story. Last winter, when my extra semester in Israel came to an end, I flew back to Boston to spend time with my family. I had not been home for even 24 hours when my parents received a phone call from my younger brother. We answered, and on the other line, my brother blurted out, "I have something I have been hiding from you all. I am an alcoholic." My heart began to ache, and time suddenly felt like it had stopped. To this day, I am upset with myself that my first reaction to my brother's admission was to downplay the severity of his illness. I hadn't really seen him drunk, and to my unsuspecting eye, it seemed like he had only had a beer or two when we were together. My parents and I were devastated to hear about how much he really was consuming first thing in the morning in order to simply get out of bed. But denial, in this case my own, is often bigger than the disease. By downplaying the severity of his situation, albeit in my own head, I was contributing to my brother's suffering. This disease had caused him so much shame and paranoia that he had been actively hiding his drinking from us, from his closest friends, and even his two roommates. This week's Parsha Shoftim teaches us about the honor placed on the ongoing pursuit of justice. That verse that we all know so well, Tzedek Tzedek Tirdof, as translated in JPS as justice, justice, you shall pursue, is at the core of our movement. I suggest that we also place this pasuk at the core of how we understand addiction in general. I suggest that many, or as I did my research, many early commentators spent a lot of time and attention extrapolating the meaning from the double mention of tzedek, and I would like to add another interpretation. I believe that tzedek is repeated because the pursuit of sobriety is repetitive. Those suffering from addiction will tell you it is repetitive because we classify addiction as a disease while there is currently no known cure. Alcoholism is not something you can definitively conquer, and for those in recovery, continued sobriety must consciously be pursued every single moment of every single day. That said, I'm not here to teach about addiction. As an ally, I'm here to discuss the ways in which our Jewish communities and institutions need to improve to support those and their loved ones suffering from it. Think about all the ways in which alcohol is displayed and even celebrated and promoted in Los Angeles alone. An individual in recovery must face their addiction at sporting events, on advertisements, at restaurants, at grocery stores, and even at concerts. It is no wonder that according to the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, alcohol relapse occurs in almost 1/3 of alcoholics during their first year of sobriety. 70% of individuals struggling with alcoholism will relapse at some point. Those suffering from alcohol abuse have little reprieve where they should feel the safest. A byproduct of watching my brother navigate his newfound sobriety has been my hyper-awareness of the triggers that exist in our own Jewish spaces. Minyanim that encourage congregants to join together for a shot before davening begins, holiday celebrations that encourage binge drinking, and the fulfillment of a myriad of mitzvot that are sanctified by a cup of wine. How often do you attend a Jewish event without alcohol playing some role? Back to Tzedek Tzedek Tirdof. The word tzedek receives most of the ink, but what's the deal with Tirdof? While Reish Dalet Face Feet is often translated as pursuing, in modern Hebrew, the meaning is therefore intensified, not only meaning to chase or to be in pursuit, but additionally to haunt or to trouble. With this understanding of the shoresh, We could midrashically reread the verse as stating that justice, justice, remember justice, because there are those haunted in your midst. I wish for everyone's sake that denial of the disease that has been haunting my brother for years was unique to myself and my situation. Despite so much work done by national-facing advocacy groups and rehabilitation centers like Beit Shuva, there is a common trope within Jewish circles that, quote, addiction does not happen to us. We teach our kids better and we are able to better keep track of their whereabouts. If anything this past year has taught me, it is that addiction does not discriminate. Unfortunately, for those suffering from addiction, we as the Jewish community live in denial that addiction threatens us and have therefore both neglected the needs of many while also inadvertently exacerbating their challenges. The substance enjoyed in a healthy manner is described in Judges 9:13 as bringing joy to God and humankind. But our tradition also warns us of the dangers of excessive alcohol consumption. Noach celebrates or perhaps grieves landfall by making wine and drinking so much that he passes out. We never actually learn about his intentions, but we do learn that he later suffers an embarrassing moment in front of his own children as a result of his excessive drinking. Additionally, we read the following scene in Megillah 7a. Rabbah said, a person must get drunk on Purim until he cannot distinguish between cursed be Haman and blessed be Mordechai. Rabbah and Rabbi Zera made a Purim feast together. They got drunk. Rabbah stood up and killed Rabbi Zera. On the next day, Rabbah prayed for him and revived him. The following year, Rabbah said to him, come, let us celebrate the Purim feast together. Rabbi Zera replied, miracles do not happen every day. Of course, not all of us are so lucky. As Jewish leaders, we must do better. We need to teach our constituents that alcoholism and chemical addiction do not discriminate. All of us, clergy, educators, executive directors, Jews in the pews, we all need to be aware of signs of chemical dependency and resources to help those in the midst of their addiction. We must compile easily accessible lists of rehabilitation facilities, detox centers, and addiction specialists for congregants in need. We need to make non-alcoholic alternatives available whenever serving alcohol in Jewish spaces, and we must think about where they are placed. In the whirlwind that followed my brother's admission, my family and I felt grateful that my brother had the courage to ask for help in his darkest moment, but it didn't take a staged intervention for him to realize that he had a problem. And thank God, it didn't take him injuring someone else or him severely injuring himself. Following that moment of gratitude, it was time to act, and it was time to act fast. The phone call came on Christmas Eve morning, and by sunset, he entered a detox center for a week, followed by 2 months in rehab, followed by living for months in a sober living facility. I am so proud to report that Douglas is currently living on his own and just celebrated his 8th month of continued sobriety. I hope and pray his sobriety continues while also holding on to the fact that just like the chase after Tzedek, sobriety must also be a constant pursuit. With alcohol temptation seeping into almost every facet of our society, Massachusetts General Hospital recently reported that excessive drinking has increased nationally by 21% since the beginning of COVID-19. While for some, the early days of the pandemic may have been all about Tiger King and fun wine nights, we can also admit to ourselves that societal drinking has shifted, and that maybe that wine wasn't as innocent as we once had thought. After Christmas and during the early days of my brother's journey into recovery, I felt incredibly alone. Though addiction had only affected me secondhand, I began to feel a deep sadness for others in our Jewish community who felt ashamed and or isolated by this disease, whether they or a friend or a loved one suffers from it. For alcoholics, the struggle never ends. They battle their inner demons constantly while on the pursuit towards establishing and maintaining their continued sobriety. May we show those struggling in our communities that they are not alone. And may we have the strength to speak with those that have a problem and have yet to admit it. My hope this afternoon in sharing my brother's story is that he does not become another statistic, but instead brings solace to those of us in this room and in the larger Jewish community going through this with a loved one. May all of those in recovery find respite in Jewish spaces where they can recharge for their ever continuous battle with this undeniable disease. Sarayim Tovim.
Sarayim Tovim.
Thank you, Melissa, for really powerful and growable words. So we at this time, okay, so this time please rise and turn to page 500.